How was that discovered? Was that like somebody found it as it was just kind of like floating down the river? It didn't sink to the bottom, or?
Yeah, no, it washed up in Virginia Beach. So someone told me this. Again, I don't know how true it is, but I think you need 2.5 times someone's body weight to keep the body down, because the gases and decomposition will actually cause the body to float.
Last time we did this, I cracked up laughing immediately and couldn't get it together. Welcome to Welcome to ArcPoint Forensics podcast, Unallocated Space. This podcast is a live conversation about current issues and solutions within the digital forensic and incident response community. We're excited to learn with you about the space from industry-leading experts, passionate individuals supporting the DFIR community. For those of you that don't know us, we're a small company headquartered in Tampa, Florida. ArcPoint focuses on developing products and solutions to law enforcement, military, and beyond to make digital forensics more accessible. My name is Amy Moles. I'm the CEO and co-founder of ArcPoint Forensics. I've been supporting the DFIR community for over a decade as a defense contractor, supporting the DoD and intelligence community before making the leap to establish ArcPoint. I will hand it over to my business partner, Jared Rindenberg.
Thanks, Amy. My name's Jared. For those of you who might not know me, I spent 6 years at NSA supporting cyber operations and then made the jump from cyber to digital forensics at the National Media Exploitation Center, where I spent a significant amount of my time supporting law enforcement, military, and the intelligence community deployed throughout the Middle East. We're excited today to introduce a new guest, John Pizzuro, who just recently retired after 25 years, 22 of which were conducting criminal investigations with the New Jersey State Police. John managed and led investigations involved child trafficking, homicide, organized crime, corruption, fraud and drug trafficking organizations, to name a few. In John's last role, he spent 6 years as the commander of the New Jersey Internet Crimes Against Children's Task Force. John currently is self-employed as an international strategic, investigative, and business development consultant and speaker. He consults with law firms regarding investigations and consults with other countries regarding child trafficking and child exploitation. He has also created a framework for other countries to investigate human trafficking and CSAM material through the International Center of Missing and Exploited Children. John has developed programs about human trafficking, the darknet, human behavior, and neuroscience, and how it applies to real-life behavior. John speaks frequently regarding human trafficking and finance, online grooming, child exploitation, and how technology has impacted our children and their behavior. John Pizzuro is certified as a master neuro-linguistics practitioner and has a master's in human resource development and training. Very cool background. John, welcome to the podcast.
Welcome, Jared. Welcome, Amy. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
That's a really impressive background. I feel like you've done it all. Can you tell us a little bit about what got you started in digital forensics?
So, well, let me tell you this, is that what is our whole life? Our whole life is this. I could tell you as far as, and I'm going to date myself, when I started doing investigations, you're talking 25 years ago, I started tapping payphones and cloning pagers, and, then it went to cell site information. So how I really got started is that where is evidence today? And as technology grew, that's where all the evidence is. And today, this is it. This is everything. Like if I want to know anything and everything about someone, you can't use technology today unless you're the Unabomber in Montana, where there's no Wi-Fi, no electricity whatsoever. You are going to have to use technology. So that's really where I started, is because getting a snapshot of people and trying to understand people, I understand a lot through. It's not just social media, but it's how they write. Everything is digital. So we live in a digital world, and that's where we really need our digital evidence from.
Yeah, we used to say that we have no secrets from our cell phone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nobody lies to their device.
Nobody lies to their phone.
We wanted to discuss some interesting casework that John has actually played a part in. So we decided to pick the Melanie Mcguire investigation. So you obviously have had quite a bit of experience with that case.
So like what I did is I had spent time in organized crime, corruption, and child exploitation. But in this case in particular, Melanie Mcguire was a woman who was convicted for killing her husband. But the way she did it, she killed him, cut him up in 3 pieces, put him in a matching suitcase luggage, basically went to the Chesapeake Bay Bridge and dumped the body over there. So it was a really extensive investigation involving everything, not just digital forensics, but everything, because it was a circumstantial case that really came down to evidence. And I think that is the most important focus when we're talking about investigations today is evidence, right? Is where do we get that evidence from? So that was the investigation that really I was a part of. And in that investigation, I ran all the wiretap components, meaning is that all the time that she was on the cell phone in her conversation. So again, it just goes to show you that no matter what you're doing, it really comes down to technology, especially today.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Especially 'cause I'm really curious about the technology that was used back in 2007, because I've had some exposure to some of the technology like stingrays, and there were a couple other things that we use, especially overseas. So I'm really curious about that. But just for the people that might not be familiar with the case, this is one of those suitcase killer cases. That's one of the things that it was known about, or that it was known as, and super fascinating. So I'm just curious. So she had all this matched luggage, and I'm thinking back to Spaceballs, Her Royal Highness's matched luggage. But she basically tried to cover her tracks by putting the pieces of his body in this luggage and pushing it over the bridge. How was that discovered? Was that like somebody found it as it was just kind of like floating down the river? It didn't sink to the bottom, or?
Yeah, no, it washed up in Virginia Beach. So someone told me this. Again, I don't know how true it is, but I think you need 2.5 times someone's body weight to keep the body down, because the gases and decomposition will actually cause the body to float. We had, I think, another case where someone dumped the body off an airplane and put heavy chains around the individual just to weigh it down, and the body still floated up.
Rose up.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Snorkels, people.
Gross.
Yeah, the autopsies weren't fun in that one. So
I can't imagine.
Yeah. I feel like for any homicide case, it's probably not a joyful experience with getting the autopsy.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of levity in law enforcement, laughter at most inappropriate times, only because I guess that's how we tend to kind of negate the seriousness of things, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I am notorious for humor at the most inappropriate times, because that's how I deal with most things in life. So I think once you're in digital forensics, because of the material you're seeing, the only way to kind of lighten anything is just to find humor somewhere in the day. So,
yeah, I usually laugh at the most inopportune times, and people look at me, but you know what? I've gotten used to it at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So jumping back to the case, so you were investigating organized crime, and like obviously some of these, maybe not specifically organized crime in this specific instance, but how did you get into the tech aspect of it, like doing the wiretaps and the cell phone data? Was it there was other people that you were working with and you volunteered to like do those things, or you were it and that was just like where the case led you? So how did you get into the technology aspect of that?
It was the way to really get evidence, at the
Okay.
time. So for example, when I did the Genovese crime family, we did one of the first roving wiretaps, meaning is that, remember when we had the cell phones back then and we're switching, taking the cards out, the SIM cards out back and forth and using the same numbers. So our first rover wiretap, the one individual had, I think the capo had like 15 different phone numbers. So when he was having difficulty switching the SIM card out, then he would get on the phone with someone and ask someone how to do this. And so that we stole his car, we put a car bug in it. So that's where the evidence was, right? So one of the things that we did, and this goes back to the Melanie Mcguire wiretap that I'm the only one in New Jersey to do it, is called the Prospective Wiretap. And basically what it is that in a normal wiretap, your evidence is your phone. But in a prospective wiretap is that you have evidence that the crime has been committed. And by you doing interviews and taking investigative steps, you're going to cause conversation regarding that crime. And that is the wiretap we used in Melanie Mcguire. And I was brought in to really run that part of the investigation, because I had did that in prior cases as far as, wiretaps. And when you ask how did I get started, that was how I was going to get the evidence. So it was that And then when we went to cell phones and started using them, the best thing that we had was cell site records, right? Is that really to put people in a location. Just to give you an example, like Tanique Daniels was a woman that was murdered by her estranged boyfriend and dumped in the Pine Barrens. And what happens is that even though he passed the polygraph, what he did admit to is he admitted that his phone basically, he had his phone the entire time, but his cell site information pinged on the towers where the body was buried and where he was during that time. So again, for me, I just wanted to lock him into that phone. And I think that's where, in essence, where your technology started, and that was the interest started. So when I started in that investigation, to me, everything was the phone. So whether it be the pay phone or whether it be the pager, because it was people communicating. Back before we had all these records that you can just really digitally get, I would look at people's phone activity, and you would look at it and you see a 4-minute call and you see a 30-second call, and a pattern basically develops.
Yeah, because that time frame, you're probably more of developing behavioral patterns and pattern of life versus pulling files out and trying to look for conversations like we have now.
Yeah. So now, back then, I couldn't pull that or an excerpt at the time. So what they called is a dial number retrievers. That what you had to do is one of the things before you got approval for that wiretap. But that was the fascinating part. Is this is really where I started back in the organized crime days. I would look at people's phone activity and I would see the calls back and forth, and I would see a call, let's say 4 p.m. every Friday. Well, that person was probably collecting at the end of the week. I would see 4 or 5 calls to that same individual that was a family member. This phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning, it was just amazing. Is that, again, you're not a computer, and we didn't have computers to spit out an analytical product back then. But then, I'm getting a snapshot. And I think that's what really started me on my path, because I started finding so much fascination about what people were doing and how they were talking to it and how they would respond. And I would go interview this individual, and immediately within 1 minute later, that individual is calling this person. And who are you going to call first? You're going to call someone who you need reassurance from, or someone to get rid of evidence. So it started developing a pattern, and that's what I started doing from an investigative standpoint is just focusing on that. And that's where we created the Prospective Wiretap, all based upon investigations. And we did this in the Melanie Mcguire case.
Okay.
Wow. That sounds like really labor intensive to go through that whole process.
Well, back then I didn't have the easy button, right? I couldn't just pull out the files. So how do I get the evidence, right? But I'll tell you what, though, as painstakingly, and it was painstaking because I show the argument like banker's box, and I go out files and, you're looking for the needles in the haystack, literally, rather than doing it online. It's not like you're going into like SQLite databases and going and doing that forensic deep dive in unallocated space. I'm doing it with papers everywhere, right? So, yeah, painstaking. But what it did was it gave me an understanding of people's behavior and human behavior that I was able to, lack of a better term, exploit later on for investigation to get the evidence that I needed for my case.
Wow.
Cool. So I've recently gotten into ham radio, as nerdy as that is. Did you ever have cases involved where people were using radios to communicate versus cell phones, or they were trying to use other alternative types of communication?
Okay, so as we progressed, and if I'll snapshot right now, if I was any type of criminal, I would not even be. First of all, I wouldn't use a phone call anymore. I'd be playing through Fortnite and communicating that way, or I would communicating through Wicker, or an end-to-end encrypted app. I mean, obviously, as technology is there, but back then, it was remember Messenger, like the BlackBerry Messenger. For whatever reason, we couldn't really get BlackBerry Messenger, and then eventually. But my funnest thing was the Google email wiretap that I did once. And guy was from mainland China, and I know I'm jumping around cases a little bit, but they're fascinating. Is that the guy is selling methadone to people in the United States, and he's using Google. So we get a Google email. So we basically set up a computer. Every time he sends an email, we get that email, and it still says that it hasn't been read in their system. That's one of the things that we wanted to make sure, right? So then no one could look at it. But it was great because it was in Google Translate back then, and this was 2011, 2012, right? So, and it was in Mandarin, and he would translate to English, and literally we would know where it was being shipped to. So we would watch the package being shipped. I think we arrested somewhere around 40 people in that. Even individuals that were buying bomb chemicals before the Democratic National Convention, precursor bomb chemicals by an Iranian national from that Chinese thing. But again, that's why the proof is it's the communication. It's how we do it. So we went from the payphone, we went from the pager, we went to, your literally cell site, and now you're going to Google email, right? So fascinating. And that's where, that digital evidence. So when you ask me what really kind of put me over the top, it was that Google email wiretap, because I'm like, wow, this is fascinating. You know how much evidence I'm getting right now? And it's easier, and I don't have to go through all these papers. You mean it translates for me? I'm not looking at the actual dictionary? This is amazing.
It's like the first time technology is on your side for once.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is really interesting. It's interesting that you are like laying out the evolution, and just jumping back to the Mcguire case, or I don't know what we want to reference it as, the suitcase killer. What do you think this case would have looked like if there was like Internet of Things devices or IoT devices that were involved, like a Google Home or an Alexa or even like an Apple Watch?
So I'll give you this, is that during that case, we had this really grainy video of her parking her husband's car in Atlantic City to say as an alibi. So she brought the car down there, parked it, and then she's walking out of the car just to say as an alibi that he went down there, and I couldn't kill him. So she was trying to create an alibi. We weren't able to use that video in court because it was completely grainy. Today, with today's technology and cameras and the way we can zoom on things, it'd be a home run. So when you're looking at the Apple Watch, it's just my favorite, is that I think more cheating spouses have been caught with because of their co-joined apples, when their heart rate goes up at 3:00 in the morning, right? Than anything else. But the reality is location. I would have pinged every single location. If she's taken, photos. I mean, we wouldn't get that before. I mean, if she's driving a car today and I just bought a brand new car and I got Apple Play on it, right? So all that I would normally never have. Your car's taking that information. Heck, your refrigerator's taking your information from your Nest, how you program it. If I was an investigator today and I saw, and most people who are energy conscious, let's say, they're keeping their heat on at 50 or 60 degrees. I'm going to get your Nest records, and you're going to say, no, I was home. Then why would you have your heat on 60? Because all the other days you were never home, you had it on 60. And I could show that you put your heat up to 80 when you're actually home, and it means someone else is in the house. So those are the things that people don't even really think about, because what you're trying to do to a jury is you're trying to paint a story, right? So, and there's so many aberrations that we just don't accustomed to. And I'm using the Nest as an example, is that people will set a thermostat to when they're home and when they're not home and when they're sleeping. I mean, it's patterns. And I think that is the thing I recognize. So going back to all the paper boxes and everything, is I noticed patterns, and that's what digital forensics gives you. It gives you the patterns without going through the boxes.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I liked about the cases that I worked, is it wasn't just a single piece of media. It was multiple pieces of media that belonged to one individual. So for me, when I was investigating that, it was like a 360 review of this person's life, no matter what device I was looking at. If it was their laptop or their mobile device or their iPad, it was really interesting to see how each individual device was used so differently by the same user.
So in the Melanie Mcguire case, it was a circumstantial evidence case. And what do I mean with that? Is that there's not a lot of direct evidence. So for example, we took the garbage bags, all right? One of the forensic individuals was able to show that the bags that the body was buried in were the actual same lot, basically same consistency, that the bags found in there and the bags found in the search warrant were a forensic match. Also, the weights were consistent with the same type of weights, the matching suitcase luggage. What we did was, it was a pattern of actually using all different type of circumstantial evidence, but it was just an overwhelming case, to the point where she went and drove down to Delaware, where she went and drove down, but she said it was for furniture shopping. So those are things that really, in essence, for that case, the totality, it made it that there was no other evidence to look at in those instances.
Wow. Yeah, that's a wild case, because I wanted to know exactly how the conviction was determined because of the different pieces of evidence, and I guess the lack of understanding, because I know that there was a lack of understanding of how the body was actually dismembered, and where it was dismembered, and how they turned that house over multiple times to try to figure that out.
So one of the things in the closing argument that the prosecutor did a great job is, so I did the search warrant of her house. In that house, it was devoid of any debris. Like, if you looked into a snapshot of Melanie, she had her spice rack in alphabetical order. So it's like sleeping with the enemy, right? So you have her clothes were all like from smallest to biggest. So she also had help. We were able to establish that a gun was purchased, which was the same caliber that was believed. We never recovered the gun. When we went and did a search warrant, again, these are the things from the circumstantial thing that you have a challenge with. So I went and searched her storage facility, yet her husband's wallet is inside the storage facility with his driver's license. And the last thing I check, her narrative is that someone is going to leave, right? If someone's not leaving their whole with their wallet left behind. So why is that in her storage facility? She also had a lockbox. In that lockbox, when you moved it up and down, it had the consistency like the gun was in a lockbox. We popped it up, open, and there was batteries in there, right? So she put that in there just to give the illusion that I had nothing to do with it, right? So, and her husband's license and wallet being in that facility makes no sense to her narrative that she's spinning, that she went somewhere else. So right. Those are the things that we were able to establish.
Yeah, I mean, I leave my wallet everywhere, but I immediately turn back when to get it. So I'm also not going to leave it in a storage facility. That doesn't make any sense.
So again, yeah, we didn't have direct evidence. We didn't have the saw that cut the body up. We believe that she had help. We weren't able to get enough evidence for the person that actually helped her. So during that investigation, because again, he was a pretty big person. But the thing is that a lot of people will say, well, could have been someone else, or, everyone's into conspiracies. But I have yet to see, in all my times investigating, someone breaking into someone's house, stealing their weights, their suitcase luggage, their garbage bags, burying the body, and then keeping their driver's license, as well. So those are the things that, even though we didn't have that physical evidence, it's just overwhelming.
Yeah. How much more difficult is it now versus back then to get a warrant for cell phone collection or things like that? Like, how has that process changed over the years?
So the process has changed like this, is that it's not really any different. It's still getting a warrant, and it's the judges and how they understand things. Judges today have very limited knowledge of what's happening from a technology standpoint. If you talk to a judge about the cloud, they're going to go outside and say, nah, it doesn't look like it's good morning. Right. So, I mean, and it's a really big challenge, especially as we, as a community of investigators, go forward, because people are understanding evidence from that simple point of where I can go to my file cabinet, and that's what they're thinking about. But the cloud, they can't conceptualize. So they couldn't even conceptualize a lot of data and how data is recovered. So that is the challenging part today, is that they are so behind from a technology standpoint and don't understand just even rudimentary forensics, or just never mind the normal conversation. So that's why explaining that is really important. But what I'm noticing now is a lot more conferences now are dealing with digital evidence. And I think that is, in essence, what judges today need to understand a little bit more. And I think as detectives and investigators, we need to make sure we spell that out more. And we don't do a good job sometimes, is we just take template after template, but just breaking it down, understanding it. Like in Melanie Mcguire's case, when I hit the search warrant, they didn't have inside that search warrant anything about a wallet or anything. I had to amend the warrant at that time in order to get that. So those are things as investigators we need to be mindful of, because that's what's going to gain us the evidence later on.
Yeah. So as IoT has been obviously exploding in the last couple of years, is that becoming really common and prevalent within a lot of like local and state level law enforcement agencies now, or is that still something that they're trying to catch up to?
I think they're still trying to catch up to it. Like, it depends on the investigator. Like for me, I'm writing a warrant to get your Alexa. You get your Amazon that's recording that. I'm looking at your refrigerator, your Nest, your Ring doorbell camera. And I think that's where all your evidence is. There is so many. I used to, like when I was doing the organized crime case, you don't know what it is to sit in the bushes with a black and white camera and sit there. And now I can go and get a Ring doorbell camera. Come on. So, I mean, really, really, it's kind of changed in that respect. But to your point, Jared, I think it's more complicated, not because the investigators, I think we need to have a better idea of how to articulate it so the judges and prosecutors understand it. So sometimes we need to kind of, how do you put it, lessen the words that we use and try to translate it so they can understand it and we can explain it in a more palpable way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Because this technology, I mean, it's so new and so complicated, and it's always changing. It really is. It's difficult to stay on top of it, even for the experts.
Yeah, but you know what? As an investigator, I would look for anything. Like, to me, it's one of these things as an investigator, and this can be applied to a digital forensic person. Doesn't matter. Is it possible, right? And if you frame it that way, everything's possible, right? So, when someone says, "Oh, that won't work, you can't get evidence," I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that. It's kind of like Back to the Future when they called Michael J. Fox chicken when Biff did, right? So if someone tells me it's not going to work, that's what I'm going to try to do.
I'm seeing a trend lately, and it's probably been happening for a few years now, but a lot of it could be the digital forensic field that's being more relevant in the industry lately, like in the news and media and stuff like that, that there's a lot of independent researchers that are kind of stemming out and digging into cases that have been closed. And this case is actually being researched by another podcast called Direct Appeal, where they go in and they talk about the case, and they had an entire series for a year about it, about why she was wrongly convicted and all those other things. How do you feel about that? I mean, it's a little intimidating sometimes.
Here's the thing. Has there been cases where people have been wrongfully convicted? Absolutely. I know just for this case in particular, the amount of evidence that we went through. So the podcasts only have what the court, what's on records of court. And in a criminal case, half the things that you have in, a judge or a defense attorney is not gonna let you maybe have them in because it might persuade the jury a certain way, one way or the other. It might be prejudicial. So what these podcasters don't have is they have transcripts. They don't have all the evidence. They weren't there. Now, I would ask the podcasters this, then tell me, like I said before, all right, you tell me the case that you've seen before where someone breaks in a house and grabs their garbage bags, their weights, their matching suitcase luggage. All right. If you can explain that in an evidential standpoint, I listen, right? So the thing is with this case is there was no evidence for anyone else. So the whole defense point was because he was in the mob and he had incurred gambling debts. Well, there was no records of any gambling debts. And generally speaking, having worked the Genovese crime family, Russian crime family, and syndicates and organized crime, I could tell you this is that generally speaking, if you owe crime families money, they're not killing you because they need their money. If they kill you, they're not getting their money. All right. That's number one. Number two is, yeah, they might break your knees or threaten you. But they're not going to go to the lengths of doing the things that, like, again, breaking into someone's house. Three, there was no evidence to support that. Again, we're looking for evidence to support that. So the podcasters that are doing that in direct appeal, they necessarily don't understand organized crime. They don't understand gambling. They've never worked an actual physical case before. They don't understand evidence procedures. They don't understand that. So while they can do all the research in the world, and they're looking at it from an independent viewpoint, they're still going to miss a lot. So again, and what do we love in this country more than anything else is a good conspiracy. I'm still trying to find out.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, that is true. It keeps people on their edge.
Uh-huh.
Well, it's really interesting to hear the impact that IoT is having and could have on other cases. Are there other cases that you feel that would be just as impactful?
Oh, yeah. I mean, first of all, trafficking cases today, right? So human trafficking, child exploitation. Before I left, we spent a lot of time on tour and like let's say the pedo support community and the different communities on tour. Again, Internet of Things, again, people are going to do whatever they can to hide their anonymity. They're going to hide their evidence. But what IoT gives us, it gives us that there is a footprint someplace, right? So the more technology is out there, recording our movements, the more likely we are to find an ability in a way in, right? So the goal of someone like on the darknet and Tor is to get them to get to the ClearNet, basically where we can, find an email or little data point that helps us identify someone. But the reality is that even these individuals are going to have an Apple Watch. They're going to have like their phone. And thankfully for the cloud is that people forget to shut off their devices when it syncs. And if you forget once, it's syncing to somewhere else. So that's where that evidence is. And because I'm an Apple person. So, I mean, I have my Apple Watch, my iPod, my iPhone. So literally Apple backups, right? So people forget, well, I'm keeping it, but then all of a sudden your computer backs it up. So, and that's where it gives you additional evidence. So I think in any of these cases, whether it be organized crime, especially with gambling, all the gambling, racketeering and loan sharking, stock fraud manipulation, all that, I need digital evidence today. I mean, as an investigator, you cannot be a good investigator without understanding digital forensics and understanding where you can get that evidence from.
The human trafficking, that just like the whole concept is really kind of fascinating to me. I saw an interview with a woman a week or so ago where she was talking about she had been trafficked from when she was in her teen years, and the grooming process for her was about 2 years, but it got to the point where like the first time that she ended up running away, she came right back. Like she didn't, last more than a couple hours. And she went right back to, the people that had basically like groomed her and set her up. But what would be interesting also is from a technology perspective, because obviously they're aware of how technology and especially IoTs could be detrimental to their whole organization. It'd be really interesting to see like what kind of countermeasures they're starting to implement as they kind of expand or try to maintain their trafficking organizations.
And first of all, the trafficking thing, and this is what kills me, is that a lot of people are into like trafficking has all this money out there, and we're not looking for Liam Neeson. It's not the movie Taken. It's not like, I'm going to find you and I will kill you, So
there's that guy in Washington, right, out of Spokane.
So
a couple of weeks ago, didn't he do that? basically did that?
Yeah. So I think that, but from here's if I am doing it, I'm using Wicker, I'm using Proton Mail. Again, I can get information from Proton Mail, but it's a little bit more encrypted, a little bit more difficult. But I'm using like Wicker. I'm using an anonymizing software, end-to-end encryption. So that's where I'm going to do that. I know this as an investigator is that I've talked to different ones. Some people are taking everything. How many people, because I know we weren't, are taking your Xbox, right? So because that's where the communication is, because it's not moderated. So where traffickers and predators go to where places aren't moderated. So like Kick back in the day, it wasn't moderated. Whisper, Scout, when you go to these apps, they're not moderated. So then it becomes important to get that evidence after the fact, because unless you get one of the devices on one end or the other, that's the only way you're going to be able to get that evidence. So what we started doing in some of these cases is doing social engineering, where the people would identify and want to come to us because we created an environment for that. So I think one of the environments that we would do is when we're chatting with someone, we're like, hey, don't send us pictures. And they're like, well, what kind of cop doesn't say to send us pictures? I'm like, I don't want to go to jail. And matter of fact, they would call us and I'm like, I'm not sending you a picture. Matter of fact, I don't need you. I'm going to go to someone else. And that created a fever pitch for them to engage with us and get out of that safety because we acted differently. And I think what happens is in law enforcement, we're so used to doing the same things over and over, but the amount of evidence that you can gain today is just immeasurable from technology. And again, like the Apple Watch with the heart rate, all kidding aside, from where your location, like people don't even realize, I did this documentary last in March. It was just about how privacy and how the government is stealing your privacy, yet they're not looking at Amazon or Facebook or any of the other big things, but look at your advertising IDs. I mean, they track you all the time. So, all that, the more technology takes from us, the more it can give us an investigation.
Wow. Jared, do you have any other questions?
No, but I do have some videos that I can play.
Sure.
I do have one question before we cut to the video. So a lot of the cases that you've examined have a lot of noxious material and difficult content.
Yeah.
What advice can you give investigators who are either been in the industry for a long time or just starting out to kind of help them process and preserve their mental well-being?
So I'll tell you this because I went through it. So when you spend, and I didn't go all into my story, but I had a contract out on me by the Genovese and Banana crime family. I investigated a police officer for killing someone for the mob. So I was getting death threats from a police department because I was investigating corruption. I went to baby autopsies. I went to, people, all different types of autopsies. So a year before I got into ICAC, I became burnt. I would rather just sit on the couch and play video games and wouldn't want to do anything else because I'm just completely shot. What happened was during that time, I developed an interest in neuroscience in the brain. I always had that, that interest. And I think 350 books within a year, that's what led me to the whole neuroscience aspect of how we think, how we frame our language. So for me, I changed my language. I changed my focus. I changed my meaning to things because there's 4 things that encode trauma, but one of them, how to beat it, is how you're the meaning. So when I went to ICAC, even though as all the material that I've seen, the worst material by far is in the ICAC community, child exploitation that you're exposed to, but your meaning is there. You are more purposeful there than any other place I've ever been before. And that purpose is what makes you different. And I think if you can focus on what you've done to help people and not seeing a child broken, but a child saved, that really helps. But you have to have that conversation. The biggest thing, it starts with self-awareness, and you have to give yourself breaks. And by changing that and changing your meaning, because if you find yourself doing that, you need breaks. And that's what I would do with my people in ICAC specifically, is because it's challenging. And I think that we, it's no different than this, Amy and Jared, is that in order for you to be effective, if I am in charge and I'm a leader of you, and, I need you to be the healthiest you can, because a healthy Amy and a healthy Jared is going to be a more productive Amy and Jared. So it's really important to really understand that and, take those steps. And there's a whole thing. I mean, I could talk for this forever, but yeah, it's very important because it really will impact you. And it not just impacts you, it impacts your spouse, your children, your family, and everyone around you and your friends. And unfortunately, there's not enough people looking out for you. So you have to start looking out for yourself first. And there's resources out there. It's just understanding those resources.
What's your favorite resource that you've used?
So that's where the NLP came in, neuro linguistic programming, and it's all about how language and patterns, because that's pretty much it's the reframe. But if I was going to tell anyone to get a book right now, like Mindset by Carol Dweck, excellent book, because we're so fixed in a mindset. It's a growth mindset. So what I did is I framed myself in any situation. I asked myself 2 questions. What can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? Has a completely different perspective than, being problem orientated, solution orientated.
Wow.
Yeah, that's all that is really interesting. I think we could probably have a whole podcast just on that. And I think it'd be really interesting for the community if, at some point we did. But yeah, to the points that you were saying, I listened to an attachment specialist, I think it's Adam Lane Smith, not too long ago, and he's talking about dealing with a traumatic loss. And that is, similar to what you're saying is once you are able to process it, like initially you tend to mentally disassociate from that stuff. Like that, I guess that would kind of be the burnout point. But then if you can start thinking about it differently when you're ready to start addressing it, to where you can start thinking about the positive things that you were doing or the positive lessons that you learned or the positive experiences you had with these people, then eventually you can start kind of shifting, how you respond to those past situations and past memories.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, I've had a lot of experience, with that, because, it's a drop in a bucket. When you talk child exploitation cases and trafficking cases, it's just a deluge. Cyber tips have gone up, 500%, it just because everyone's using technology. And one of the biggest things is that we all have this picture of what our life should be. Even if I look right now at LinkedIn and I look at Facebook, I'm going to think my life sucks because I see everyone doing this, that, and the other thing, even though it's just because this is where we are, right? We see this and like, oh, I want to be this. And then, well, I'm not that. And it takes time. One of the things is that we reward people in public for what they practice in private, meaning is that we never see what they do. Like the phenomenal athletes, like you could take Michael, they're doing it 20 hours a day, but all we see is the finished product. And I think we don't understand that sometimes because we want that instant gratification.
Yeah, I can relate directly to that Facebook comment. Just sometimes I go on there and I'm like, these people are always on vacation. They're still on work. I was like, they obviously have to work. They need the money for that vacation, but my goodness.
Yeah, and Amy's in a startup who's spending 20 hours a day working, and you're like, well, where's the light at the end of the rainbow, right?
Yeah.
That reminds me, I need to go post some pictures on Instagram.
Oh, yeah. Jared's notorious for posting pictures that Jared takes a ton of pictures when he travels, but Jared posts pictures that from like years ago, and you're like, where is he?
I try to put timestamps on them, but it doesn't seem to really matter all that much. People don't read the text, the captions.
Yeah. It's like I could have swore that he was in Arizona this week or something.
Well, you know what our attention span is, right? 6 seconds. That's why, what they call it, I'm surprised that people are really actually spending time more than 6 seconds on the TikTok videos because you have to do everything and be entertaining and like that, right? So,
Yep. Yeah. Oh man, Instagram stories, freaking time suck. I've deleted Instagram, I don't know how many times in the last like 3 or 4 months just because of the reels. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Just because I'm like, I'll just start going, and then 25 minutes later, 40 minutes later, I'm like, what happened? Yeah. What am I doing?
Yeah.
Time traveling.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. You're like, this got 50,000 likes, right?
Yeah.
So
You really start to question humanity.
50,001.
Okay, so we're coming to the end here. Jared has a video reel that he's going to share with us. We call it Experts React. It's just a fun little exercise or segment that people really liked the first time we did it, so we're going to continue it.
Yeah. Okay. So I got a couple of videos picked out here. These are all from Designated Survivor. I really like picking on Designated Survivor right now. So let me just go ahead and cue these up, and we'll have a look-see. Okay. So I'm going to cut it right now. I need to just connect real quick because it's in a different tab.
Deny.
Rude.
Just kidding.
This call is being recorded.
That's fine.
Ooh. There's two of you. It's echoey.
All right, let me see if I can fix that.
Did you, John, did you see Jessica's podcast episode?
no, I didn't see it yet. How was it? I'm sure. It was
Oh,
good.
this will be good then. So I'm glad that you didn't see it because Jared is, for whatever reason, obsessed with Designated Survivor.
I thought you were going to pull my video.
Jared, you muted both of yourselves.
Yeah.
Now.
I thought you were going to pull my video where I looked like I was 12 years old from Court TV.
Oh my gosh. When I was looking at that, I was like, how old is this? Let me see. I was like, wow. I actually thought you looked pretty good now.
Okay. All right. You guys can hear me okay?
Yeah, but John, you're muted. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah. There you go.
All right. So this will be the confession.
Yeah, it's good we're cutting all of this out.
Yeah.
Oh, can you hide your other title? Your tile?
Okay. So to set this up, so Designated Survivor, obviously, Keith Sutherland was this low-level secretary, and there was a tragic event. What's that?
Yeah, I saw the show. Yeah, I've seen
Yeah. Okay, yeah. But for everybody else that might not be cued in, so he got elevated to president really, really quick. And there's a couple of like FBI agents, Secret Service, like close individuals to him that help him out through this process that are kind of doing their own behind the scenes investigations. So this is one of those situations where they were looking for some photo evidence to figure out what had happened the day of.
First you get me in trouble, now you want to help me?
Truth is, I never liked orders to compel, and I think you're kind of badass.
What do you got?
Okay, so I hacked the woman's cloud, and you were right. She took 2 photos between the time the feed cut and the time of the explosion.
Missing 34 seconds?
Yeah.
Show me.
And Congressman McLeish, and you see
Chuck, I've
that
seen this.
enhanced
for it. This photo was taken 6 seconds later. I can't tell you what happened that night, how they did it, why, but I can tell you McLeish survived.
Because he wasn't there.
I love the detail of that enhance. It's like the classic, like, oh, we can't see what's going on here, so we'll just pinch to zoom, basically, right? Pinch to zoom. And then I've got one more, and I imagine probably back in the day, John, when maybe you didn't have time to go get the warrant, or you just didn't have time for all this mess. This is probably how things were handled.
I'm not that old. Come on.
Some people still buy this stuff, huh?
What can I say? Hipsters live analog. I got a shotgun mic and receiver. 1,000. The nano tracker inside, negligible weight difference. Tracking radius of 10 miles.
Perfect.
So what happened?
10 miles.
You run out of toys?
Thank you for the quick turnaround. I owe you.
Is that how any of that works
Did that?
in real life?
Well, I'll tell you, it doesn't work that way in real life, but I would take that little pen and I definitely enhance that. If I had that from Melanie Mcguire, I would see her photo instead of like this grainy different thing. And then that would be perfect for an evidence, like that little enhance. It's amazing how in the TV show, how they can just keep going to blocking the license plate. The full license plate magically appears. Although,
Oh yeah.
Today with today's technology, it actually does, right? Like ALPRs, you have all that technology that automatic license plate readers will give you that information. So yeah, I put it this way. I wish I was a detective with all this technology because my solve rate would be 100% higher.
It's just so interesting because there was a recent court case where an AI enhanced photo was used to try to clarify what was happening in the scene. Do you think that's going to become more common where AI is involved in actually like artistic renders?
All right, here is my I think at some point, but don't forget this is that it took the courts a long while to even introduce digital photos because they would only take the regular crime scene photos because they didn't understand the digital photos, so they wouldn't even let them be in court, right? So they wouldn't even do that. So, but with the AI thing, my personal opinion on this, and again, it's just John's opinion, is that I think AI needs a lot to grow, is because again, we're putting what it's supposed to be in there yet, and we might be missing things. And again, I think AI is going to make things easier, but then I think there's got to be a point where then there's a second validation tool, in essence, to make sure that everything would match a little bit more specifically. But I think AI, I know there's products out there, whatever, you can type in Glock and okay, a gun comes up, but it might not be a Glock. So I think like anything else with the AI technology, and I just think that it gets us there. I think it's more of an intelligence standpoint at this point right now, pointing us in the right direction than actual evidential that we're going to actually use. Because I think that ultimately that's just going to say, okay, let's go through our normal procedures to get that evidence. Now it just helps us that we don't have to look through a million photos or videos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, now he's froze.
Yeah.
Just the amount of data that's coming in, there's just so much of it and it's overwhelming. And as the internet becomes more accessible to more people around the world, that is only that like basically like data density, file density, like user created content density is only going to expand. And there's a limited number of people that can actually process it. And there's a limited amount of technology that can process it. So it's a real challenge. And just being able to sort through those needles in the haystack, like you were saying, there's going to be have to be leaps made with AI to help out investigators, to help the humans on the ground to actually like find those like specific points of interest really quickly.
But if you're asking me when it'll be introduced in a court, you're talking 5 years, right? I'm just, of the scope, because I think judges and prosecutors need to understand the cloud before they even understand AI, right? So I think those are the challenges. But again, it's how we can explain it. And I think we're in a world of technology. We need technology to solve technological problems, but we also need people, because at the end of the day, people are behind the technology, and we can't lose that, because then we're going to be missing things. The whole idea is not to be missing things. It's to be a little bit more fluid, to triage things. But me as an investigator, what keeps me up at night and what kept me up at night isn't the cases that I solved, it's what I missed. So those are the things that we have to collectively come up with different solutions for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, our point's trying to come up with a collective solution in AI. So just follow us for more updates as we go through that process. But all right. Well, thank you so much for joining us on our podcast. It was an honor to have you and kind of like take a look at, the suitcase killer and all the different aspects of IoT devices that could have had an impact.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. It was a blast, and hopefully I kept you a little bit entertained and didn't have you fall asleep. So
no, it was great. And John, where can people find you?
You can go to johnpizzuro.com, which basically, or find me on LinkedIn.
Okay, all right, and we'll post your Twitter handle and any other social media handles that you've got.
Perfect.
Well, thank you, John. Really appreciate it, and we'll let you go.
All right. Sounds great. Talk to you
All right.
soon. All right.
All right. See ya.
See ya.